being honest, I never expected it to replace that income. I was very well rewarded in my previous roles, and obviously it is a business. I do want it to be sustainable and to work well, and it is sustainable. But I wouldn't. I didn't go into it expecting it to be, to replace the the remuneration that I was getting in big tech, but.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. Before Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7 and 8 figure career coaching businesses myself and consulted with 2 career coaching businesses that are now doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or just building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. Today's guest is Robert Hamilton. Robert is an executive coach specializing in helping product managers and PM leaders thrive, whether they're scaling their impact inside high growth tech organizations or prepping for their next big opportunity. With a decade plus of experience building and leading product teams at Google, Meta, and other fast-paced environments, Robert brings both strategic insight and grounded empathy to his coaching practice. Since 2016, he's supported PMs in navigating career transitions, growing into leadership, and tackling the messy middle of product work with clarity and confidence. Whether you're looking to nail your next interview or lead with more influence, Robert offers tailored coaching grounded in real-world product experience. I have the pleasure to have you on the podcast. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Robert, tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to become an executive.
So, it's interesting you mentioned 2016. That was actually the first time when I did kind of formal coaching with a real relationship. I suppose I'd always try to help people around me and others in the organizations I was in, or other people who were thinking about being product or working in tech. But in 2016, a friend actually came to me and said they had someone in their team who wanted to move from software engineering into product management. And they were in a team at a startup, and they said, would you help coach them? So that was really the first sort of formal engagement where I was meeting somebody regularly. We had things scheduled on the calendar. They thought of me as their coach. I thought of them as my client. I was actually taking a break. I had a year off in 2016 when that started, but 2017 I joined Meta, and I kept that relationship up. So that was really the first formal thing. And then gradually during my time at Meta, I realized that I enjoyed that probably more than actually building and shipping products, because I've been building and shipping products for a long time, kind of longer than I care to remember. And I realized that I wasn't really getting a lot of fulfillment and a lot of interest in shipping another thing. I've worked on big products at Google and at Meta, and I've worked at startups. So earlier on in your career as a product manager, you learn a lot from every launch. You learn a lot from everything that you build. But for me, that was diminishing, and I found it was more interesting to be thinking about people. And I really felt that side of helping people grow, helping people thrive, was more interesting to me. And the switch to full-time coaching came about because actually I got some feedback at Meta, which is really interesting. One of my reviews was, we know that you're a really good coach and mentor. We would actually prefer you to focus on execution, on shipping. And that had probably the opposite effect that my manager was hoping, because I said, you know what, I'm actually going to go and coach full time. And I left Meta to set up my coaching practice. I had a bit of a break, and then I started coaching back in 2020. So that was really it started, as I say, with one client. I had a full-time role that was happening alongside it. But then that feedback at Meta really sort of crystallized it for me. And I thought, well, if I can switch to doing the thing that I really find interesting these days, then maybe now's the time to do it. And I did think at the time, should I do, one more career move? And I really asked myself, well, do I think that would make me a better coach? Would another couple of years, maybe at another company, could I have joined another company and got more experience and rounded out my experience? But I actually decided that there wasn't really a lot of value, that my career spans 30 more years. I actually started, when I was still at school, I started writing software. So I've been kind of involved in professional product development for well over 30 years. And so I did conclude that, yeah, I could have got another job and maybe picked up a bit more experience, but it wouldn't have significantly improved my coaching practice. And actually, one thing that gave me the confidence to jump and start this, I was actually working with an engineering manager at Meta. And in a reorg, our teams, I moved to a different team, so I wasn't working with them anymore. And they actually came to me and said, would you mind acting as my coach? Could we have a regular coaching session where I bring my challenges to you and we talk through it and you help me see things differently? Because he said, I miss having you as a partner. I had been in the tech world, engineering managers and product managers work together. We say we're like a work spouse. It's like that. That is my spouse at work. And that was really, gave me confidence, that I thought, oh, this very talented, very senior and experienced engineer thinks that my feedback as a coach is helpful and they want to continue that relationship. And so that was another signal, if you like, that, yeah, this is probably something that you could make work. And yeah, that was over 5 years ago. So here we are today with a lot of water under the bridge since then.
Yeah, interesting. And so I wonder how the journey looks like from the point that you like moved full on to coaching 5 years ago when you started to where you are at today. Did you initially had any worries about like obviously you're leaving a job that is that everybody probably wants to have or yeah, and you're moving into a career that you don't know for sure, like you know it's gonna work, right? Because you know you have the skill to do that, but do you know that it's gonna be easy to replace that income right from the start? Did you have any worries at the beginning?
Being honest, yeah, I never expected it to replace that income. I was very well rewarded in my previous roles, and obviously it is a business. I do want it to be sustainable and to work well, and it is sustainable. But um, I wouldn't. I didn't go into it expecting it to be, to replace the the remuneration that I was getting in big tech, but. Um, I thought that it was at least worth trying. That trying it, if it didn't work out, if it hadn't worked out, and it's something actually that a former colleague and friend said to me at the time was, anybody can become a coach, but the question is, can you stay as a coach? Because there are lots of people who say, oh, I'm a coach now, and this is what I do, and then 6 months, a year, 3 years later, are they still doing it? Can they? Because the barrier to entry is fairly low in many cases, right? You could say you're a coach. Yes, there are certifications and other things, but there are lots of people who just decide, as indeed I did. I'm no different from that. But no, I don't think I worried about it. I just knew that I could try it, and across the course of my career and my life, I haven't been afraid to try something and fully commit to it, knowing that if it doesn't work, I can try something else. And I think that's a really important um, point. Is if you do take the leap into doing something, you want to be fully committed. You don't want to be like, well, I'm not sure this is going to work, so I'll hedge my bets until you reach the point where you say, you know what, despite my full commitment, this isn't going to turn around, and so the time is right to stop. And I think that it's quite nuanced, that idea of like fully committed up until a point where it doesn't make sense, and people can be a little bit um, not uncomfortable, but find that unfamiliar. They're like, well, are you really committed? If you're prepared to stop doing it, are you really committed? And I think you can be. I think it's possible. So yeah, if it hadn't worked, would I guess a variant of your question is, would I still be doing it if it wasn't, growing as a business? Probably not. I would probably have gone back to doing something else. But no, I felt that it was something that I would be able to establish and would be able to make it work.
Hmm. And right now, because it's also interesting, when you take a leap of faith like that, do you have a goal in mind? You're like, I'll try it for a year and a half, or I'll try it for 2 years. If it doesn't work in 2 years, or I'll try it for 3 years. Right now, it's been 5 years, so there's a different question that I have in the end, which is like 5 years after, did you actually achieve, did you manage to get back to that income, or um, at the beginning, did you have a certain period of time in mind that you're going to do it for this much time and then move on if it doesn't work?
No, I'd be lying if I said I'd given myself a deadline, or a goal. It was really, let's see how this goes, and that that is sort of a reflection of how I tend to plan. I know lots of people, like, I find them on my client base. Some people are, I am taking this job for 2 years. It's a 2-year role, and then I will move on. And other people, a little bit more like me, are kind of, I'm going to go and do that and see how it feels, see how it goes. I will keep doing it until it ceases to be interesting, and then I'll find something else to do. And that's usually been my approach. I was at Google for 8 years, for example. When I joined Google, I didn't think I'm going to be here for 3, 4 years, or I didn't think I'd be there for 10 years. I was there while it was the best choice. And then when another opportunity came along that looked interesting, I decided to take that. So that is my outlook. And I know that there are a lot of people who say, I'm going to give this 3 years and I'm going to reach this financial target or whatever. And that works for them. And that's great. There's also a lot of people who don't talk about their plans because they had a very detailed plan and it didn't work. So there is a lot of survivorship bias around planners. People are like, oh, my plan worked perfectly. Like, well, great. Can we attribute that to there being a plan? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it would have worked anyway. So that's kind of my personal outlook. I'm not a great planner to say, right, if you can't make this work in 2 years, because I feel that um, it it isn't the sole, like how much revenue you make, for example. Well, that matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. Having fulfilling work that I enjoy, working with the kind of clients that I want to work with is important to me. So there are other considerations, and it isn't purely, I don't judge the worth of the business purely on how much revenue it generates, because could it generate more revenue? Yes. Would that be nice? Yes. But something else would probably have to give, and I would, I still do want to grow my business. So I think most coaches are still hoping that their business can get bigger. There are definitely some who are kind of fully tapped out and trying to scale in different ways. But no, I didn't ever set a date, and I'm not recommending that. As a coach, one of the things we tend not to do is to offer advice. We help people by giving them different perspectives and helping them to think through their challenges. But it's very rare for me to say, here's what I think you should do, or here's what I would do. So in that same vein, I'm not suggesting to people that you shouldn't have a plan. I'm just being very honest and saying I didn't, and I'm still here anyway. So it can work both ways. My plan was give it your best shot, and that's not a detailed plan. I admit it's just to kind of like see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that that you are able to take that and actually make it work on the long run. So you do work with product managers and product manager leaders. Um, who is there a specific industry? Basically, you come from tech. I'm wondering if it's only in tech, or is there other industries that you help people that you coach?
Pretty much all my, if I think about across my client base, they all work in. some form of tech product development. So mostly software. There's one or two people who work in hardware, but it's mostly software development. And that, that varies from big tech companies, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Adobe, to smaller startups and kind of everything in between. But I don't, and it's like I have clients who work at retailers, but they are building software at retailers. So I'm not working with, say, marketing people or with partnerships teams. I'm usually working with people whose job it is to build software to support their business. So I guess you would say, a retailer, like a big brand retailer, is not a tech company, but I support people within that, my client base within that company. Those would be people who are building software, building the website, building other support mechanisms and algorithms for the retailer. So I think everyone I work with, I'm trying to sort of mentally scan through my whole client list. I think everybody produces software. I'm sure I may recall something later, but during our conversation, nobody springs to mind who doesn't generate software. That's really been my focus, and that's where most of my career has been spent. I did work on hardware for a while at Google.
Nice. And where do you find your clients right now? I can imagine you also have a big network, but yeah, what would be the main marketing channel that's working best for you in terms of you connecting with potential clients?
So I do get a lot comes from referrals from previous clients and from people that I've worked with in the past. LinkedIn is probably the next most successful channel, and that's something where it's obviously it is the professional social network. That's typically probably that, and actually for some work, Blind, the anonymous social network, has also been quite valuable. That tends to be much more on the career side than on the exec side. So that's typically when people are seeking to make a change. My exec coaching business, I say that's mostly people who are in a role and want to stay in that role and increase their impact. Whereas the career side is when people are definitely looking to make a change. But I was quite surprised that Blind, which is very tech focused, and as I say, it's an anonymous community. But other than that, LinkedIn is definitely my best source of business, and that's where a lot of my inquiries come from.
And is that organically, or is there some strategy that you think is working for you in LinkedIn?
I think it's a mix. There is quite a lot of organic, people using search. I think I rank fairly well in search on LinkedIn, and some traffic comes to me from Google, organically from Google, from search as well. I'd kind of forgotten about that, but I do try to create LinkedIn content. I'm not the most consistent content creator. I really I find it hard, if I'm being honest. It isn't my natural thing to I I am more interested in coaching than I am in marketing. And I think many coaches are in that problematic spot of, well, I'd rather be coaching, or I don't like promoting myself. And so for me, LinkedIn is really, I try to be very authentic. I don't post about things that I'm not really interested in just for the sake of posting. I have been experimenting a little bit with video, and I think that is going to make a difference. And I think video has a lot of potential for coaches, because you can really get a much better idea of what it might be like to work with someone, I think, from seeing them talking on video, perhaps having a conversation like this, obviously a compressed version of that on a LinkedIn post. But I think that particularly these days, when people can use LLMs to write their posts, and lots of people are, then there was a time when you probably had to be a reasonably good communicator to appear a good communicator on LinkedIn. And now, certainly for text-based content, you could just have an LLM do that and write a good post for you. So that's definitely changed things. I think that video, that is one of the reasons why I think video is going to start to become more important. Plus, the world is becoming much more video centric these days. And I think LinkedIn is, from everything that I see from the way that LinkedIn is developing as a product, they plan to go more video centric. So there isn't a deep strategy there. I have been working with some marketing partners and I've been working with people to help me get onto that strategy, but it is not my natural thing to be doing. And I mean, as an example, there's a thing that a lot of coaches will do, which is to say, I'm accepting new clients, or I have room for 2 more clients. And they do that to generate the idea of scarcity. And personally, pretty much every client I work with would see through that in a second and be like, you don't have one spot that's opening up at the end of May. You know, I see coaches will say that, like, oh, at the end of May, I'm going to have one spot. Let me know if you'd like to join me, if you'd like to work with me. And most of my clients, as I say, are super smart, savvy, and would just be like, that's just a marketing tactic. So I try to avoid, and I'm not saying it isn't a tactic that can work, but I feel that my client base would not respond well to that. I'm sure it works for lots of people. It's not something that I would like to do. So there are lots of, I think, effective tactics which I don't feel sit well with my perspective and my positioning. And that's just an example of one. And, you know, again, I think a lot of coaches will create programs and course content. A lot of people, you know, will do a course and have a course on Maven and so on. I prefer to do one-to-one work. I don't really want to produce canned content and generate revenue from content. And again, that's just a personal preference. I know it has served a lot of people well. I'm not a teacher, I'm a coach. And I think there's a difference. I think when you're creating course material, and here's my video program, you can sign up for it on Maven. And I know that, you know, on Maven, people do have one-to-one sessions and other things added around that, but it still comes from this kind of, there's a curriculum that you will follow. And my coaching isn't like that at all. So again, that's not an area where I want to get involved. And I actually had recently a client of mine paid for a course, product management course, and they didn't enjoy it. It was one of the big name courses, and they said to me, why don't you do a course, because it would be really good. And it's like, well, I don't want to do one because courses are generic. If you're going to commit to it, it is not tailored, it is not customized, and the work that I do tends to be much deeper and closer to the challenges that the individual has, rather than, here are 5 things that the best product managers do. That's true, but my clients already know those 5 things. My clients are all really good at what they do. And so they've already tried those 5 things, probably, and they found that they don't work for them. So I think that's why the sort of prepackaged content piece doesn't work so much for me, because there's a coach, an engineering leader at Google who is doing some coaching now, and he commented, or he posted on LinkedIn a month or 2 ago now, if I thought that you could write an effective book on leadership for individuals, I would write it, but I don't. I coach. And he had that same thing as, like, you can distill down to a rule set, but those rule sets are very general by definition. If it's in a book, it's going to apply to lots of people. So LinkedIn is where I mostly hang out, I would say. And but I am, again, not the most strategic in my use of it. I have a lot to learn.
Well, thanks for sharing so much on this. And you said there's no course, but I believe when it comes to your coaching structure, is there a program structure? Even if it's not a course, is there a structure on it?
We almost always have goals. So, in fact, there's always at least one goal that the client has, that they perhaps want to reach the next level, or they want to be better at managing up, or they want to build better relationships with the people that they rely on, their partners at work. So there's always a goal, at least one goal, sometimes 2 or 3, which we are working on. And one of the things that I've realized with my clients is that most of them have pretty good defaults. Let me explain what I mean by that. They are good at what they do. Most of their decisions are valid, correct. They tend to get things right. And every now and again, they need to learn a new skill or try a different approach because their default behavior, the thing that they reach for most commonly, is not working for them in that situation. And one of the things that I do is to help people bring in new defaults. So if you have one particular working style, there will be times when it isn't effective. And at that point, you think, well, I'm trying everything that I normally do, and I'm not getting the results I want. And at that point, the answer is probably, well, then you have to do something you don't normally do. And that's where I can help, is to suggest approaches. So I guess if we were to distill it to a program-like thing, it would be, well, what do you want to be different? What are your goals? What are you trying to change? And what about your behavior is holding you back? So identifying the things that are holding you back, and then layering in the new defaults, which aren't usually a replacement. So it's not about saying stop being like that, because being like that has got them where they are, right? They're working in big companies. They're in fast-growing startups. They're already in a good position. So it's not saying stop behaving the way you're behaving. Let's add in some new behaviors so that you have other options and can try different things, and then working with me to try those things out, see how it feels. Usually it's a bit uncomfortable. If you're someone who is normally very collaborative and you decide, actually, I need to learn sometimes to be a little bit more kind of me-centric, if you like, and collaborate a little bit less and drive things myself more directly, that might feel uncomfortable. That it's like, oh, I'm putting my opinion forward more than I normally do. I'm being a little bit less consensus driven. So again, working through that, figuring it out, and adding that option. So it's not about saying I'm going to stop being collaborative. It's I will retain that ability and I'll add some new things. And the phrase that I use for kind of the process for that is tilting the mirror. It's like, if you were looking at something in a mirror, you get a flat reflection of you. And that isn't very helpful, right? You can get that from the mirror. As a coach, my job is to tilt the mirror and give you a perspective you don't normally get. It's to kind of like, hey, why do you think that person is behaving that way? Or why might your current approach not be effective in this situation? And not to overextend the mirror analogy, but it's like, if I don't tilt it at all, there's no value. It's like, well, I could look at myself and get that. And if I tilt it too far, the client can't relate to what I'm saying. So my job is to tilt it enough to give them a different perspective. So I suppose I would call that an approach, maybe, rather than a program. And it is very different with every client. I have clients that I've worked with probably like almost every week for several years. And they, see me as a long-term career partner. That like they bring challenges almost every week. And then there's other clients who I engage with for a period of a month or two while they're trying to figure out their next move. They figure out that next move, and then I don't hear from them for a couple of years, and then they come back and say, okay, I'm ready to move again. I want to figure out what I want to do and why. And I think now, being 5 years in, I've got some clients who are almost on their third engagement, that maybe have worked through them in 3 different roles. So that's the other part to it, is there's that kind of long-term engagement, which is not something that I think as a coach we can necessarily aim for. But I think if somebody values us as a partner, they will think, oh, I'll talk to Robert about that. In fact, I have a client who told me once, we were in a coaching session, and he said, oh, by the way, I don't think I've told you, but my wife is a big fan of yours. And I kind of laughed. I was like, well, how, why? And I think he could sort of see in my face that I was a little bit, just curious, I suppose. I just looked curious. And he said, there are certain times when she and I are discussing something, and she says, I think this might be something you should discuss with Robert. And I don't think that was her not wanting to discuss it. I think she just felt, oh, this is something where you are a coach. Your coach could help with this. So it's interesting as well to see the things that bring people back. There is always this thing as a professional coach we are not trying to build a long-term dependency. That is not a good thing for a coach to be doing. It should not be, I want to retain this client for as long as possible. I want to help this client as much as I can for as long as they want the help. And so when people say, hey, I'm done, I've got my new role, that's great, and I'm happy for that. And then, maybe they pop up again a year or two later when they have a new challenge.
Hmm. I really like that. I really like the impact you have not only on the person you coach, but also in other people around them, such as the example you took. I wanted to ask, for the future, do you have any goals you're working towards in the next 1 to 3 years with your coaching business?
I have some time goals where I want to reliably hit a certain number of hours. I don't want to coach all day, every day, um, but the business can sometimes be a little bit peaky, where it gets busy and I'm working probably more hours than I would like, and then there's quieter spells. So my goal would be to achieve my my target number of hours pretty much without much variance, so that kind of every week I could say, yeah, I've got my across the next couple of months, I'm going to have those hours, and that um, that's kind of at the root of any other goals of like, well, how much revenue would I want my business to generate, and it be consistent, and me knowing that the business is in good shape and is running consistently. So that's really the goal that I have, and um, it does take time to reach that, but it gets a little bit easier every year. Not least because of repeat business. As I say, I think I'm fortunate that my model, there are reasons for people to come back and work with me, and so that helps with the consistency piece. But yeah, that's my main goal, is to get to um, a a steady model where I probably wouldn't say, well, these clients want to work with me in the next couple of weeks, so, and that's going to take me over my desired number of hours, but I'll take the work because it might be quiet for a couple of weeks afterwards. So that's the aim, is to kind of normalize it and not put in extra hours just because the work is there. And my coach said to me, sometimes you've got to make hay while the sun shines. It's like when the business is there, you've got to take the business, and she's right. That is exactly true. I want to control the sun, uh, in that, to overextend that analogy, and be able to kind of be like, well, actually, I know it's going to be sunny next month, so I can wait, and that's what I would like to be able to do, is to have that predictability.
Hmm. And in terms of investments, have there been any coaching programs, masterminds, or communities you've been part of that you'd say have been valuable in growing your coaching business?
I haven't found one. There is. I haven't found one that's necessarily been super helpful. Um, I I tend not to, and again, this is uh, this is an area where again I could probably learn a lot. Um, I do talk to other coaches, and occasionally someone will be like, "Oh, should we chat?" And is there any potential for collaboration? Um, but I found it to be quite um, unpredictable in terms of whether it's valuable or not, and um, so there isn't any sort of community. I'm trying to think. There. Um, I'm part of a couple of communities where there are coaches and clients in the same community, but there isn't something. I haven't found anything which is purely for coaches yet. I haven't engaged with Purple Circle. That could be a thing, and I'll be interested to find out more about that. But no, there isn't anything yet that I've found. Um, I've tried lots of communities, and I think a lot of people, when a lot of communities, there's a lot of people sharing free advice, and there is often people are like, well, this person is happy to chat to me, and that, or reply to my questions, and I have to pay you. And that, I think, is one of the challenges in some of the communities that I've tried, is that it's like, oh, well, this person has offered to talk me through this. It's like, okay, well, they are not a full-time coach. Um, I am not going to do free coaching. That they are probably doing another full-time role, or are involved in some other project. So no, I haven't found anything that's really helped me to accelerate my business, unfortunately.
So, apart from like coaching programs, masterminds, and communities, have there been any other like sort of investment that you found that has helped uh, grow your business in the last 5 years that you say, oh, that was a good investment?
uh, I think that, um, just let me think for a moment. um, I have tried to encourage. Let me, and we can you can scratch this, obviously, the edit. So thinking about investment, or ways methods that I've found to generate business. One of the most effective ones has been to, in the bigger businesses that where my clients are, where there's a lot of other potential clients, in encouraging those people to promote me internally. So, if there's a list of coaches, please add me. How did they find me? And how do other people in their organization find coaches? So trying to connect to those people, sometimes connecting to the learning and development teams within my target companies, because again, they tend to be the people who manage the roster of coaches. Um, there are platforms, I know, that lots of big companies these days use the coaching platforms, where the company will pay for the coaching, and there's the coaches. Now, those coaches tend not to have very much experience, and some of my clients have tried those, so they're like, oh, my company has a relationship with this coaching platform, and they try that, and they're like, yeah, this person is probably quite a good coach, but they've never worked at a big tech company. They haven't been a product manager. So they're what I've found with those, and this goes hand in hand with working with the L&D people. That's why I'm talking about it under this investment piece. Those when clients of mine have engaged with those platform coaches, they're like, it was good for a few sessions. They had some useful insights, but then they're kind of like, that's all they had. They didn't have the depth of, whereas I have been in that seat. I've done that job, and so I have a perspective that none of those coaches have, because they're not experienced in what I've done. So that's why, sort of going to the L&D people, who often will say to me, well, everybody's covered, because they just go on the platform and they get matched with a coach, and and a lot of the L&D people are happy with that, because they're like, yeah, I've made it super easy. They don't have to pay. It's all straightforward. It's all easy. But the value that people get from the coaching isn't necessarily there. So that's been one thing, is trying to get people internally to refer me, and to kind of promote me internally. And uh, there's there's one piece. Well, actually, let's pause for a second. You were going to ask me about something that didn't work, or something that surprised me.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that next.
Okay, yeah. So let's do, because I was going to go into something which is an answer to that. So we can do that next. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that was good to know. Is there like something that you wish you had known when you first started scaling your coaching business, like an unexpected lesson learned?
Yes. Sorry if there's pain on my face as I think about this. One thing that surprised me is that managers are not very good referrers. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I know lots of product management leaders across the industry, and almost always when I approach someone like that, because I think, oh, you have 20 PMs in your org or 100 PMs in your org, maybe there are some of them I could work with. Almost all product leaders and managers say, no one in my team needs a coach. They're all amazing. Or they have a, a bit of a perspective which is, oh, coaching is for people who are struggling, not for my top performers. And I'm always trying to encourage people, well, you know, you it can be for both. You know, there's if you've got rising stars, keep them rising. You know, just because someone is doing well doesn't mean they couldn't benefit from having a coach. And that's something where for a while I would routinely approach managers hoping that they'd be, oh yeah, I have a person in my team who I think might benefit from working with you. And it and maybe my maybe my approach is wrong, but I've stopped doing that now because it just it was a waste of time. It was very I don't think I've ever converted someone through their manager. And I can, you know, as I think it through, I'm not sure how I would feel if my manager said to me, "Oh, maybe you could work with a coach." If they were thoughtful about it and they said, "I think you could benefit from a coach. I want you to do well." You know, if they came from a place of care and support, not, "Oh, you're struggling. You need extra help." Right? That's a very different message, which is also true sometimes and is important. But yeah, it took me a while to learn that, and um, I well, there might be coaches watching this who say, "Oh, well, it does work. You were doing it wrong." So I'm prepared to be prepared to have my eyes open there, but it was a surprising lesson for me. I think the other surprising thing, which is a nice surprise, is that coaching has a built-in jerk filter, um, and because almost everyone who wants a coach has a growth perspective. They um, they recognize that they have areas to grow and that they could use help. And so there's a self-awareness and an openness to being vulnerable and to asking for help there. And I think, um, you know, I use the word jerk for whatever reason, whatever word people want to use, but that person that you probably wouldn't enjoy working with, or that person who doesn't create a good environment, they think they're they don't need a coach, right? They've got it nailed. So there is that nice factor. And I've worked in great organizations where there weren't a lot of jerks, but every organization there's some folks like that. It's unfortunately a universal thing. But it turns out they don't come to coaches, and that's a really nice thing. Is that I know when someone pings me and says, "Hey, can we have a conversation about working together?" They're probably going to be thoughtful, humble, and you know want to grow, and that's a really nice thing to get because I only get to work with people who want to get better. You know, they're not, um, as I say, they're not. Um, they don't have an opinion of themselves, which suggests you know they can't learn anything.
So I was thinking, as you mentioned, that it hasn't been very, uh, let's say, successful when it comes to managers recommending it. Um, Usually, I've had sometimes coaches in the podcast, and while I was also doing the research, is that oftentimes there will be the company is hiring the coach to work with um, someone in their team, some maybe someone in the C level, executive level, or in your case, I'm wondering if companies would also be hiring you to work with their product managers. Has that been the case, or generally the product manager would approach to you directly?
Usually, it's a direct approach. Yeah, and I think um, the big companies that I work with kind of already have a list of coaches, there isn't really a strong incentive for them to make that list any longer. And so it tends to be organic, as I would describe it. It would be nice to have that, and there are some companies where I've been able to establish that, but I found it generally quite challenging to get that. And I would, because I've been able to get organic business, and clearly that would be, it's not self-generating leads, but it is kind of, once you're in that bracket, you're in there. But I've found it sometimes challenging to get, as I say, that I haven't been able to crack the code that encourages those companies to say, you have something that we can't get anywhere else, right? That I've not been able to come up with something sufficiently unique that that works there. Maybe I will in the future, but I haven't been able to do that yet.
And if the product managers come to you directly, are in this case mostly them paying for the coaching, or they get the company to pay for it?
Yeah, often the companies do reimburse. So I do have, probably a good proportion of my client base. There is some that's self-paid, but a lot their company is paying, and sometimes it moves from one to the other. So it can be in either direction. It can either be it starts with the company paying, and then the company, there may be an annual budget, and the company says, well, you've used your budget, and maybe the client starts paying after that. Or similarly, the client starts organically paying me direct, and then actually goes to their manager or goes to whoever they need to get approval and says, hey, I've been working with this coach, it's really helping me. Do you see that? And if so, would the company be up for supporting it? So that's definitely something that happens. And, I do sometimes, as many coaches do, work with clients on that initial proposal to kind of say, well, let's make a case together for working together. Yeah. So it's definitely both. Yeah.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges, and I think you've covered some of them, when it comes to you scaling your coaching business, that you're either facing today or you faced also in the past?
I think um, really finding ways to communicate how I work, and that's where I think the video piece. I'm hoping that maybe switching to using video more will help, because I think it's very hard to stand out, and I also don't. I am not comfortable telling people, I will get you that next promotion. You will land your dream job. Like, I think those, like I saw a coach who said they had a 93% success rate of people getting their dream job. And as a as a product manager, I'm like, how can you actually quantify that? That, it's even the attribution, like, would they not have got the dream job had they not worked with you? That's impossible to calculate. And it just seemed to me like I would never claim something like that, because I would look at it and think, well, you can't really claim that. You can say that you help a lot of people, you can say that you do this. So for me, making that, helping people understand what I do without resorting to what I call overclaims. I'm not comfortable doing that. I can't guarantee that people will. Well, I won't put a specific guarantee on something, and that perhaps is a challenge and kind of holds me back, because there are lots of people who are comfortable saying, "Hey, if you do my course, 80% of my students get their dream job." Well, that again is like, that's not what I do. So there are lots of people advertising these very sort of concrete, do this, you'll get that. I think maybe they are aiming at people more junior in their career than I work with, but I think for all coaches, distilling the value. Um, like every one of my clients can tell you what they find valuable about working with me. It's harder for me to synthesize that. Um, Maybe I should just, spend 3 months with a marketing person working on that. That's not like I'm not a marketing person. That's kind of maybe that's actually what I should answer this question with. And if you want to edit one that just says the biggest challenge is that I'm not a marketing person and uh, you know, this is a marketing problem. That's a better shorter answer.
So it's yeah, it's kind of like at the top, like a lead generation, you would say, issue. Um, it doesn't matter how they come in. Like obviously, um, m- guaranteeing results is probably not. Um, I know some coaches will do that usually, and you said it's hard to quantify that because let's say how would you know that they wouldn't have been successful had they not worked with you? Generally, I think some coaches will answer that saying that they would have not worked with the client if they didn't see the potential that they could help the client from the start, meaning that they didn't see the potential that the client has some potential that they could unlock or something like that would have been from my understanding because I'm not a coach, but yeah, um, I totally understand that. And right now at this point in your business, how do you currently handle the balance between delivering great client results and also being able to kind of work on the business growth in the other side and kind of like find time to even like do podcasts like this with me or even do a post on or a video on LinkedIn.
I think that's relatively easy for me. Well, it's easy for me to find the time, whether or not I am executing effectively on that. And again, there's a reason I'm not a marketing coach. I can do execution in product development. I can do that and support folks with those goals all the time. But because I'm not aiming to coach as many hours of the week as I possibly can, there is time for me to be reflective and to think and to read and to, there's also, to your point, there is, as a coach, most coaches also want to be working on their coaching, not just on their skills, not just on working with clients, right? So there's two areas of development. There's growing the business and there's growing my ability as a coach. So I think you need to have time for both. And because I'm not aiming to absolutely fill my schedule with client facing time, it's not lack of time that prevents me doing the other things. It might be, as I say, lack of awareness, but certainly in terms of me studying, reading, reflecting on things that I come across, and I have plenty of time to do that, because I'm not trying to, as I say, I'm not trying to coach, like a 40-hour week. There's no that's not a goal for me, is to fill every hour with coaching. So I think some coaches may find that harder. For me, it isn't so difficult to carve out that time.
Hmm. Great. And we're almost getting to the closing question. So it's like actually the final question is what advice would you give to other coaches, whether they are executive or career coaches that are looking to scale their impact from your perspective?
Oh, that is a great question about uh, scaling a coaching business. I think this is advice that many people get early on in their coaching journey, and I think the sooner that you take it on board as a coach, the better life is, which is to um, find your niche, find the thing that you can do, because it's counterintuitive, but if your clients can't kind of self-identify into working with you, that like these are the people I help, if you kind of like, oh, I could help anyone, well, you think, oh, that increases my TAM, my total addressable market, right? It's like, Well, actually, it kind of it does theoretically, but I think I mean an example that I was given early on, which I think made me think was some. There was a coach who said they'd seen someone who said, I work with female pharmaceutical execs in their mid 30s looking to get to the next level. So think of how many qualifiers there are. Female pharmaceutical execs in their 30s, right? That's like if you stood up in front of 1,000 people at a conference and said, "Who's in that group?" Everyone who is in that group knows they're in that group, right? It's very clear that like, oh, that's not me. I'm in my 20s. Oh, I don't work in pharma. That's not me. Having that clarity of like, this is who I can help. I think the sooner that you get to that, right, then the people are like, oh, maybe that's the coach for me. You put yourself into that option pool because there are so many coaches out there that the ones that are like, maybe I can help you, let's talk. That offering is so vanilla that, you know, I think it's hard for people to commit. So that's something that I've seen is that the more quickly you can get to that, uh, these are the folks that I help, where others can identify into that group. So the more clarity you can get around that, the better. And certainly, if I think about my first website that I built back in 2020 to support my business, it was kind of like, yeah, let's talk. I'm a coach, right? That was like, and we'll figure it out together. And when I redid my site, it became much more focused on this is who I help. These are the challenges I help them with, and that felt much more concrete. And so I think that the sooner that you can, and for most folks, there's a fear there of like, what if I miss out on a potentially valuable client because they're like, oh, they'll probably call you anyway. If they were thinking, oh, you know, I was hoping to work with you. Like for example, I worked with an engineering lead at Google, and I mostly work with product people. But this engineering lead said, a few of the product people I've talked to who worked with you think you're a great coach. Can we work together? So that person isn't in my target audience, but they pinged me anyway. So it is a little bit counterintuitive. And if I had studied marketing, there's probably a term for that, that process of identifying who you're helping people to understand that they are your target market, and it's something that I think the sooner you learn that, the faster you will start to be effective from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Niching down is one of the things that gives a lot of people confidence in working with you. So they feel like, oh, if they're working only with women in pharmaceuticals in their 30s, then they have experience with probably potentially the same issues that I'm going to face. They have probably found a solution to those. So it gives you just confidence to those people versus, oh, I coach everyone, and yeah, you can find a solution for everyone. It's like kind of hard to get confidence out of that. So yeah, I really appreciate that's great advice. So for anyone who wants to connect with you or reach out to you in the future, after looking at this podcast, maybe they are an executive coach, a career coach, or a coach that's maybe developing their product. I know you mentioned that you generally have not worked with people that are like building a digital product for say like a digital marketing product. But if they say that there's a coach that is building that product and wants to reach out to you or even just to connect with you for a coffee chat, they would find you on LinkedIn at Robert Hamilton. They could also find you at your website, accelerationcoach.com, right?
Yeah, yeah, those are both good ways to find me. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and yeah, that's there is an Instagram account lurking somewhere that I don't that I haven't invested in very much. But yeah, LinkedIn and my website are great ways to get in touch. And I'm always, one of the reasons that I wanted to join today and to answer your questions was to share experiences and share mistakes I've made. And if there's ways for me to help other coaches along their journey, then I'll always do my best to do that. People have helped me, and it's good to offer that too. So sure, if people reach out, then I'll be happy to help if I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robert. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. To learn more about Purple Circle, our community, and how we can help you grow your business, visit joinpurplecircle.com.